Hey everyone, it's Rob in the Abyss, and the first 25 years are done. They're in the books. Still some movies I've missed. Even some of my favorites we were talking about in class last night. I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot this, this, and this. So we will have to eventually do an episode of catching up with some movies I've missed. But today we're going to start with the second half of the first 50 years. It's 1996, the year I got married. So it's a great year. A good year of movies, a couple good years of, a couple good records for this year. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with a movie that was made, I think, for HBO. It's called The Late Shift, and it's basically the story of the battle between Jay Leno and David Letterman for the job of The Tonight Show after Johnny Carson left. And it stars Danny Roebuck as Jay Leno, and then John Michael Higgins as Letterman. And then you have Kathy Bates, who plays the manager and friend of Jay Leno, and a lot of other familiar actors and faces that you might notice. Ed Begley Jr., another one. And it's a really interesting story, and it really shows how the networks were kind of wishy-washy about it and back and forth. And then the way that the two stars were trying to find another deal with CBS and so on, and wondering if they want to go to cable. There's just so much in-depthness to this story, and it was really well done, and the acting is really good. It feels like you're watching Letterman and Leno, and it's worth the watch. You need to check it out. Next up, Tom Hanks, That Thing You Do. It's about a band. They call themselves the Wonders, and they have a top hit on the charts. It's called That Thing You Do, and it's the typical story of a band who's a one-hit wonder. Interesting tidbit, the musicians, when they were hired, had about 2-3 weeks to learn their instrument and learn the songs, mainly the Thing You Do song, but a couple other songs or some riffs, and get it down. And so when you watch them in the movie, they are playing those parts, which I love because it just brings the authenticity and the realism. I mean, as an actor, we would all agree we want it as real as possible, and that's what they did for this movie. It's pretty solid. Next up, a fun Michael Keaton movie, Multiplicity, also starring Andy McDowell. He starts cloning himself, and each clone is very different, and so Michael Keaton has to play several parts throughout this, and he does it really well within keeping into Michael Keaton. And we talked about this the other day. When you're playing a character, you're either playing it from your brain or you're playing it as you, and that makes that character authentic and real. And Michael Keaton, he's a very talented actor, is able to pull that off, and it makes for a pretty fun comedy. And as you see, the cover says it all, but a good comedy. Beautiful Girls, Uma Thurman, Rosie O'Donnell, Lauren Hawley, Mia Sorvino, and then of course on the guy's side you have Matt Dillon and Timothy Hutton. I don't really know if there's a true purpose to this movie. I mean, they're all getting ready to go to their high school reunion and such, and it's kind of scattered. A young Natalie Portman is the neighbor of Timothy Hutton. But it's kind of a fun story, and the acting's pretty strong, and it kind of has a fun feel to it. There's a great scene in a bar where Timothy Hutton's playing piano, and they start singing "A Sweet Caroline," and it's just it's really entertaining. So, like I said, if you want just a fun, laid-back, thoughtless movie where you just want to be entertained, this is a good one to give a shot to. All right, next up is Ray Liotta and Linda Fiorentino, Unforgettable. It's kind of a different movie. It also stars Peter Coyote, who I think is a good under-the-radar actor. Liotta's wife gets killed, and she helps him find a serum that he can inject to live through her eyes to see what happened to her, and it creates a pretty good suspense thriller mystery type film. And this is Ray Liotta in his heyday at this point. He's done Goodfellas, he's done Unlawful Entry, and now he's doing this, and it's him at his finest. Not as good as an Unlawful Entry, of course, but still a good I like using these terms and I get stuck using the same terms, but I don't, like I said before, I don't really know how to describe it, but it's a good under the radar type movie that probably you've never heard of. But if you like the actors, you got to check it out. Now, on the next side is one you guys have all heard of, The Rock, Sean Connery, Ed Harris, Nick Cage on a smaller scale. Those other two are heavyweights. You know, Nicolas Cage is the movie star, but those two are the heavyweights. I love this movie because it's filmed at Alcatraz. I'm fascinated with the story of Alcatraz, and anytime you can get a movie filmed at the Rock and then call it the Rock, it's well worth a watch. And it's a unique story, and it's interesting how they did the story and how they tied in Alcatraz to that. But like I said, most of us know it, most of us seen it, but it needed to be mentioned. Mel Gibson, Gary Sinise, Ransom. This is kind of like we talked about Ray Liotta, Unlawful Entry being his first film after Goodfellas. This was Gary Sinise's first film after Forrest Gump. And it's an interesting, once again, mystery type thriller movie. And of course, it has the famous "Give me back my son" line, you know. And the kid does a great job, and it's pretty powerful. You know, Rene Russo, another one we talk about quite a bit. You know, just a good acted film with good actors in it, a good story, unique, and really good at this time. I enjoyed it. Michael J. Fox, The Frighteners. This is a different type of Michael J. Fox film. He actually makes his money trying to help ghosts get out of houses, right? He's chasing ghosts out of haunted houses. But when it's all said and done, he's kind of in cahoots with the ghosts because he can see and interact with the ghosts. And then it takes some wild twists and turns and such. And it makes it a fun kind of horror, thriller, comedy. And like I said, very different than something we've seen with Michael J. Fox in the last several years. But once again, this is them banking on his celebrity, and you know, he was a good enough actor to do these different kinds of things, and this is another one that's a really fun film for him. One of my favorite sports movies, Tin Cup, Rene Russo once again, Kevin Costner, Cheech Marin, Don Johnson, and this is where I really see the change in Don Johnson's acting, where he has a good kind of wit to him, and you know, kind of a jerk, and it works for him, and he does it well, and he does it believable, and he's kind of the other golfer who competes with Tin Cup, which is Kevin Costner, and once again, it's another one of those good, fun sports stories, right? It's a love story with sports around it, and there's some great one-liners. You know, the 7 is the best club in the bag. You know, it's you know, I'm paraphrasing, but you know, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, you'll know what I'm talking about. But a good, fun sports movie. I remember watching this with Amy and Carmel. We went to, I can't even remember where we were going, but we stayed the night in Carmel, and you know, not realizing that the town shuts down at like 2 p.m. We grabbed some food to go and flipped on the TV, and My Fellow Americans was on, and we were rolling. It's fantastic. James Gardner and Jack Lemmon play former rival presidents. James Gardner is a Democrat. Jack Lemmon is a Republican, and then the present president is Dan Aykroyd. But it's more based around the two former presidents, and they kind of get stuck on the road together. And I don't want to give away the story, but they basically have to learn to coexist after hating each other all these years, and end up having an admiration and respect for each other when it's all said and done. And it is, you know, once again, you got two classic actors in Jack Lemmon and James Gardner, and you put them together, and that continuity and that relationship and that banter, it makes for a really, really funny movie. And having them as ex-presidents and rival parties makes it even funnier. It's one of my favorite comedies, and it's one that you guys need to see if you haven't seen it. Another comedy, Jon Favreau, Vince Vaughn, Swingers. Most of you guys know it. It's pretty good. It's kind of what started Favreau and you know, Vince Vaughn together. Yes, they were in Rudy, but not really working together. This was the first one, and you know, Vegas, baby, Vegas. You know, and your money, baby, your money, you know, all the one-liners and all the stuff. And once again, this is not the best Vince Vaughn. You know, he's still learning to become an actor, but you can start to see uh, that charm and that charismatic personality in him that's going to lead to, you know, his later films and you know, some of the best comedies of all time. But this was definitely the start, and it's one that you know, if it's on TV, I'm definitely going to watch, and it's one I enjoy quite a bit. Another one you guys know, Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, Cuba Gooding Jr. It's a good, unique story about a sports agent who has a conscience, and the one football player that sticks with them, and how they ride from the bottom to the top together. And it's loosely based on a story about the, you know, sports super agent Lee Steinberg, and he's actually in the film at the end with Troy Aikman. But like I said, we all know it. It's a great film. It's a fun watch. And you know, once again, if it's on TV, we most likely all of us are going to watch it. It's really good. Renee Zellweger, you know, I'm not a huge fan, but she's really good in this. And the kid, of course, you know, the human head weighs 8 pounds. What can you say? When you have kid actors, we've talked about it numerous times, who are just natural, they're really, really funny. You said fuck. That kid's great. Jonathan Lipnicki, you know, he does an amazing job in this. All right, down to my final three. Alec Baldwin, Anthony Hopkins, The Edge. They don't quite get along, but they don't not get along. It's one of those kind of in-between type things, and they get stranded on this, I don't know, Alaskan island. I don't even know if it's an island, this mountain area. They're kind of trapped, and you need a plane to get there. And it's them, you know, trying to survive together, and at the same time, you know, trying to deal with their own personal issues. I mean, they're two really, really good actors. I was just talking about in class last night. You know, Alec Baldwin, you know, I really don't like who he is as a person, but boy, as an actor, I do. I love what he does. I think he's just really, really good. He's strong in the eyes. He's believable, and he's really makes the roles he's in powerful. And we've talked about a few of them with Glengarry Glen Ross and Malice in the last couple of episodes. And this is just another one. And Anthony Hopkins, I mean, you know, once again, coming off Silence of the Lambs, he's really peaking at this point. And you put these two together, and it makes for a very, very powerful movie. Runner up is a timeless classic comedy. Nathan Lane, Robin Williams, Gene Hackman, and Diane Wiest in The Birdcage. Yes, it was a play that they put into a film, but there's so many good moments, and there's the ones, like we point out, where Robin Williams accidentally slips in the kitchen and gets up and goes, "Fuck the shrimp," you know, and, you know, just staying in the moment and going with that energy and creating realism is great. And then Gene Hackman having to deal with dressing in drag and keeping that serious and going along with all the stuff we always talk about Gene Hackman, that, you know, he's always Gene Hackman, and now he's, you know, he's a, I believe, a senator, and he has to keep his rep, and he's caught at this, you know, gay club called the Birdcage, and it's just a fun comedy. When Robin Williams is teaching Nathan Lane how to be more manly, you know, and you know, the behaviors and the way they deal with the son, there's just so many things. Once again, of the continuity and the way the actors play off each other, that just makes this, like I said, it's always funny. You can watch it 100 times, and I've seen it 100 times, and it's always funny. There's always great moments. It's one of the best comedies. But number one is Tom Cruise, John Voight, Mission Impossible. I like all the Mission Impossibles. Of course, some are better than others, but this first one, you know, from the standpoint of the uniqueness of the story and the places it's shot in Prague and, you know, in England, and you know, the scenery and the, you know, the scene on the train. Jean Reno as another guy who is in the movie, and then of course you had Ving Rhames, and you just have another all-star acting cast. a fun thriller, mystery, action type movie. And you know what's funny is, we talk a lot about Tom Cruise in class from the standpoint of that he's probably the biggest movie star of all time, right? I mean, he may not be the best actor of all time, although I think he's a pretty strong actor. He knows who he is and he brings it to the camera every time. But as a movie star goes, he sustained over 35 years of being a movie star, and gone from those movies like Top Gun and Days of Thunder and Risky Business, and fast forwarded it into these action and adventure movies, and has made an unbelievable. Just this franchise alone has done it for him, other than all the other stuff that he's done over the last 20, 25 years. But Mission Impossible, the original, is one of my favorites, one of my favorite Tom Cruise movies. And like I said, everything about it is from, like I said, the originality of the story, the acting, and being an action thriller suspense film. It's my number one for 1996. On the film side, I'm going to go. On the album side, I'm going to start with Iced Earth, The Dark Saga. I'm only bringing it up because we've been talking about concept albums. This is a concept album based on the story, the comic book Spawn, as a matter of fact. So I wanted to point that out. Another concept album. This is heavier than the other ones, Queensryche and Sabotage, that we've talked about in the last few episodes, but it's still an interesting story and a pretty powerful record. Speaking of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, because I mentioned Sabotage, here is that Christmas album that we talked about yesterday, Christmas Eve and Other Stories, and it is a story about an angel coming to Earth during Christmas time to see if there's still love on Earth, and they do see the kindness, and they do see the helpful, and they do see that there are good things, and it kind of goes through that story, and you get a combination of Christmas classics like Carol of the Bells, but then you also get some originals like the opening song An Angel Came Down, or Old City Bar, which is a really good song. So this is starting to be the transition from Sabotage to Trans-Siberian, although you're still going to get a couple Sabotage albums in the next couple years. This starts off a run of Trans-Siberian Orchestra records, both Christmas subject matter and not, and it's really good, especially during Christmas time. Test for Echo, Rush. One of my favorite Rush songs, Driven, is on here. The Color of Right is fantastic. The title track, Test for Echo. Just once again, another very solid Rush album in the 90s. As you know, I'm a huge fan. It never gets old for me. So, you would never hear me say there's a bad Rush album. Some are better than others, of course. That's just the way of anything. But Test for Echo is another strong one. And I remember getting these through the years. And the last one we talked about a couple years ago was Counterparts. And when that came out, I was like, wow, Rush is going back to, a little bit of that, early 80s, late 70s sound. And then, I really like that. And then Test for Echo comes out and you're like, ooh, they kind of have that mid 80s sound again, but yet it's still modern and new and it's different. And that's the kind of thing about Rush, is they're always evolving, but keeping to the root of who and what they are. And like I said, this is another one in line with all the works they do. But my number one for 1996 is Michael Kiske's Instant Clarity. Michael Kiske was the former singer of Helloween, and one of the reasons he left is he wanted to kind of get away from the heavy metal scene. He wanted to go more into rock and roll in his own kind of style, acoustic at points, and this different kind of stuff. And Instant Clarity gives you a little bit of that. There's a couple tracks that he plays. Adrian Smith of Iron Maiden plays guitar on, and then he also co-wrote a couple of them. And then Kai Hansen, formerly of Helloween, with Michael Kiske as well, and who is now with Gamma Ray, we talked about yesterday, also co-wrote a couple songs and plays guitar in a few songs too. So you get some guest musicians. You get a couple songs that are heavier, but for the most part, it's got some mellow stuff. It's got some rock and roll to it, and then it has a couple songs that are a little heavier. And it's different. His voice is still there, but it's his own sound, and that's the uniqueness to this record. And like I said, I like when people do their own things, and you're able to judge for yourself whether or not you like it. And I like when he gets the guest musicians, because Adrian Smith is my favorite guitar player, at least one of them. And then Kai Hansen's another one, and you get a little extra of their music too and their writing. And anytime you can get that, I'm buying it. So for 96, it's Michael Kiske, Instant Clarity. And then, like I said, Mission Impossible, the first one, which is really good. So we are moving right along. We are going into 1997 tomorrow. Once again, I do appreciate you guys watching. I love that we're getting more and more comments, more people being involved. And I'm starting to get the feedback that people are starting to now go, man, I'm creating this list and I got to watch these movies. Chris, that was you today or yesterday, wanting to, revisit some old movies and then start watching movies you haven't heard of. And that's the whole idea of this. And Chris is not even one of my actors. He's just a friend of mine who is drawn into this. So it's awesome, and I appreciate that. So, this is great for my actors, and it's a great acting tool for you guys, but it's also great for people on the outside watching it and giving yourself a chance when you're at home to see some of these older films and check out some of this music, because I'm pretty passionate about all of it. So anyways, we'll see you tomorrow. Please leave your comments, subscribe if you haven't yet, and have a good day.